So, actually, it might be that I was thinking that the two things I particularly would like to spend some time on. One is some variants of how to use center of gravity, or how to raise your center of gravity, and also the getting up from a chair and shifting from sitting to standing, and then
Hmm.
maybe back to sitting again. We did that a little bit, but I think that's something we should do a little more too.
Okay.
There's nothing else that kind of jumps out at me that we need to do, but let's start. Which would you rather start with? More center of gravity or getting in and out of a chair?
I think center of gravity.
Okay. So for that, you'll have to be for what I want to show you, you'll have to
Okay.
be before you move though, we have done the power poses, and you have that way of actually measuring the effect, right? You can with the
Hmm.
strip across your window pane and so on. Have you been using that at all at home or
I
any?
actually, I was recording an audiobook for quite a few hours. I've got a long one due in a couple weeks. And so for a long time I was standing and recording, and even though I was aware of, the thought of I'm not compressing myself, I used that a lot when I was reading. I still felt like, gosh, I've been standing a long time. And so I did just like I'd pause the recording and I would do a power pose just to like kind of decompress a little bit and
Mhm.
to kind of get myself back in a place where I could hit record and start again. So I've been
Okay,
recording standing lately. And
right.
so I don't know how much like it made me the physically taller wasn't necessarily what I was going for, but I think there's more of like shake off the cloudiness of your mind, and I've been standing and doing this a long time. Like it helped me just break that up a little bit.
Yeah. Well, the measurement method that we had with the little strip across the
Mhm.
window, that showed pretty clearly that you do get taller.
Hmm.
But
Right.
the more important part of that, which I think I mentioned a bit, but when and it's maybe worth a short discussion. When your internal center of gravity is moved up within you using, for example, a power pose, um, the physics of that is if it's getting higher within you, it can mean one of two things or both of them. The two things would be expansion of everything above, so the opening up,
Okay.
because that opening up, it, it- that opening up is actually a, a higher center of gravity. I mean, mathematically or physics wise,
Okay.
that is what opening up does to your center of gravity. Opening up your torso, and the other thing that can cause it to go up is a little toning in your legs that uh,
Hmm.
tends to bring their total mass a little bit closer.
Ah,
Yeah, those two things, the raising of your center of gravity is both the result of either one of those, or if you have a way of raising it in the kind of ways we've been playing with, it can be
hmm.
the cause of both of those.
Hmm.
They're,
Okay.
they're totally interconnected.
Okay.
And um, so using power poses is a way to kind of almost trick your body into being a little more expanded and or a little firmer tone in your legs.
Awesome.
And I think we can elaborate on the power pose example that we've been using. We can make the power pose. We can break it into two parts that could be independently used, and then they can also be used together as kind of a um, superpower pose, let's say.
Okay.
So
Sure.
let's play with that. If you could
Okay.
be standing facing
Sure.
the camera,
I
little
didn't go to work today, so I'm in my comfy clothes.
oh,
I'm in
that's
my
all right.
slippers.
Good. Actually, tilt the screen down just a
Sure.
little. Just a little. Yeah, good. Perfect. And right there is a good place.
Okay.
So a power pose would be raising your arms, bending your knees, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and you do that a few times, and you know what the results of that are going to be.
Right.
Let's see what happens if we do some little modifications of that. So for a moment, forget power poses.
Okay.
Here's the project. Raising your arms as high as is comfortably possible. I mean, you're not trying to grab the ceiling or anything like that. You're just
Okay.
raising your arms. Now, you could just lower them, which is what you would do in a power pose, as part of a power pose, right? You could just say, I've
Right.
raised them, now I'm bringing them down, right?
Yep.
But let's raise them. And this time, you're going to bring them down, but you are not going to let that bringing down of your arms affect your torso.
Got it.
There's going to be an independent movement.
Absolutely.
What do
Okay.
you
I feel
notice?
that.
You could
I
right
love
away
that.
feel that, right?
I knew right when you said it, I knew that was, I knew that would feel good.
Well, when you're raising your arms, typically you're involving your whole body in that
Uh-huh.
movement. And now you're consciously separating the arm movement from the rest of you as a way of getting your center of gravity a little higher.
I love that. And you
So
can feel that I'm not compressing my center of gravity so well that way.
yeah, and you could do something similar by thinking, well, here I've raised my arms, so my center of gravity is a little higher. I'm going to
Yeah.
lower my arms, but I'm not going to pull my center of gravity down. And that's going to be fairly similar, right?
Oh yeah.
But I like the idea, because it'll carry over into something else, of deliberately leaving your rest of you alone.
Yeah.
And this has become a somewhat independent movement.
Okay.
It's not saying that you want independent movements as you go through life with everything, but this is an example where you can use your thinking, because that's what we're engaging here, to get a little boost in your center of gravity, which has beneficial effects.
Mhm.
Okay, now the second part of a power pose is knee bending.
Mm-hmm.
Just bending your knees. So just do that. That's something you might do and then come out of that. And you could do that by itself, and that would also raise your center of gravity a little bit, right?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe not quite as dramatically as the arms, hard to say. Center of gravity is a lot closer to your legs, so your legs have the further away in your body from the center, the more effect changes have on it.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And so your legs are generally closer to your center than your arms up here are. So maybe they don't have quite the same effect. It's hard to say. I mean, who knows if that's a measure
Okay.
we have not made.
All
But
right.
let's explore a slightly different way of doing that bending.
Okay.
So and this is tricky to describe. It's a little easier with the arms, but you could bend your knees, have the thought of bending your knees and um, not letting that bending affect the rest of your torso. Let's see what
Okay.
happens if you do that. You're just bending your knees and then you're bringing them up, but leaving your torso alone.
Yeah.
Can you sense that that gives you even a little more of what we're after?
Mm-hmm.
Can you feel a difference between that and just
Yes.
bending your knees without a lot of thought, without any thought, really?
Oh,
Just
yeah, I think so too, because when you bend your knees without any thought, you're thinking down. And I think you just,
you're thinking, yeah, because your knees are connected to your torso, and that's kind of the standard
I'll just,
works. But, when you're walking, with each step, one leg is getting closer to your center of gravity, and then it reaches the ground, and then the other leg gets closer.
mm-hmm.
And it could be that bending your knees the way we just experimented with, where you're somewhat detaching your legs from your torso, could be a very nice thing to do. Let's say you're out walking and you could do two or three of those knee bends.
Mm-hmm.
If it's not going to freak out people around you, you could raise your arms too.
I do
And
it in the garage before I go.
well, yeah, you could do that. Yeah. And then after you can sense that little internal up at work, you could say, well, why don't I just take that right into walking? I'm
Mm-hmm.
not going to depress my center of gravity just because comes off one foot reaches the ground and
Okay.
would tend to pull it down. You could say, I'm not allowing my center to be pulled down by any movements of my legs. So it might feel a little artificial at first, but you might also notice that your walking has a very different quality to it.
Mm-hmm.
That's something you need to experiment. Well, we could experiment with it right now. If you would do that knee bending that we talked about, not involving your torso, just
Okay.
just do that a couple of
How
times.
would you feel if I got rid of my sandals and did barefoot?
Sure, whatever's comfortable.
I'm like, I don't want to flop flop on the,
We're not going to get the auditory feedback, but I think we'll get feedback. So
yeah.
if you bend your knees without engaging your torso in that, and then up, and then one more time, bend them. And now take go ahead, take a walk, and with each step, I'm not pulling my center down.
Mm-hmm.
So you're continuing with can you does that feel like a different way of walking to you?
Yes, I mean, I love these results. I love it because I can almost like I can feel the center of gravity in my legs leading the way, and then
Uh-huh.
the rest of my leg follows.
Yeah.
It's just so much lighter.
Uh-huh.
And then not to mention you feel just lighter in general as a human being walking.
And you might want to experiment with that a little on your own at home with that floor
Uh-huh.
and the clogs.
Yeah, just
I
to
think
get
that
some
would be
feedback from the
really
feet.
interesting to get that auditory feedback.
Hmm.
Bring the clogs back for an encore.
If you need them, they're just 5 steps away. You
No,
can go
I don't
get
think
them.
yeah. I think you might find that walking can become a much lighter activity than
Hmm.
you, you might think, and maybe even a little lighter than you can get with just a standard direction like I'm free or I'm not compressing
Yeah.
myself. I think you can get a little more um, it's a kind of being proactive, but not the kind of proactive in terms of helping directions or anything like that. It's just
Okay.
creating a new situation for yourself and then seeing how you could take that new situation into an activity that you do all the time. And I'm going
Yeah.
to guess that after you've been walking for 5 or 10 minutes, it may have faded away the first few times. So you might want to repeat it or just think, well, okay, next time I'll try it. I'll just do it from time to time.
Right. Right.
Um, the nice thing about just bending your knees, or well, particularly that, is if you're somewhere where there are a lot of people and you don't want people to freak out, it'll be might be a little better.
I love that. Well, I was thinking, sometimes, I'll teach students like on the choral risers, you don't want to lock your knees, you want to keep them soft. And, if the curtain's closed and the curtain's about to open, I'm like, why don't we just do a power pose together, everybody, right before the curtain opens?
Why
Like, I
not?
think,
Why
why
not?
not? Like, I feel like
No.
I'm gonna need it anyway. I'm about to conduct. It's very important that my body language is clear to the students, and that'll be a great spot, when I go into those moments to let's all do it together. We'll all need it. And if
Well,
there's no room for arms, we'll just do our legs if we need to.
yeah. Just there's no reason why you can't give your students the exact same directions I just
Mhm.
gave you.
I've been trying it a little bit more. I was trying to play with the do not say list and come up with my own, better choice. I don't have it mastered yet. It's gonna take me some time, but I'm working
How
on it.
how how have they reacted so far?
Um, I have tried on purpose to not tell them that I'm trying something different. I've tried on purpose to not say, I learned this in my Alexander technique lesson. I just leave all that out. And they, when I start using Alexander technique directions, it's different than how I've worded it in the past or how other teachers probably present themselves in a school day.
Hmm.
And they are quieter, like they're a little bit more attentive, especially
You're
because,
talking about students that you've had since
yeah,
before we started.
yeah, yeah, students
Yeah,
I've had for
without
some of
you
them a couple
bringing
years.
anything up specifically.
Without me saying anything, I'll just intentionally use directions for my own benefit for teaching,
Yeah.
and then that's separate from asking them to why don't we all think together? We're gonna do this activity, but I want you to think before we start. So both of those things separately, like they're more attentive.
Hmm.
They're intrigued by what's happening and they're curious about, like, when we're doing the activity, they're curious about the response. And when they're not doing anything, it's just me using a direction on myself on the way I teach. I feel
Hmm.
like it creates an atmosphere in the room that's a lot more attentive and respectful, which is interesting to me.
Well,
We can be
and,
kind of
and these
crazy and
are
silly.
these are middle school kids, right? So they're
Yes, and you have
11,
to weave
12.
in crazy and silly
Yeah.
with these really beautifully calm techniques.
Mhm.
That's kind of a fun little magic potion I'm working on.
Well, Alexander he wrote 4 books that are fairly dense, with one exception. I mean, they're at some point you may want to read them or read parts of them. But in one of his books, he goes into a whole little diatribe about he's writing, I guess, in the 20s or 30s. He's living in England. Pretty much everyone, even like not wealthy people, people middle class or even lower middle class, would have a nanny for their kids. It was very,
Mhm.
very common, more so than I think here. Um, and he said, children are the greatest imitators. They will observe people around them and mimic them.
Mhm.
And and he said, not only that, but they will especially mimic anything that seems a little different or weird, whatever.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, they are. And I think your kids are a little older than the kids he's referring to, but I
Mhm.
think they're still young enough that they just allow themselves to change without making a big deal of it. Unlike
Mhm.
adults, where we got to teach them self directions and stuff like.
Yes.
And then he
Yes.
went on to say, he said, now these people, they want to get a nanny for their kid and or kids. And he said they will go and they'll just get the cheapest one they can get. Who's going to cost the least? And he said they don't consider the fact that their children who are going to be around this person at an early age for many hours a day is going to pick up whatever habits that person has.
Right.
And that from his point of view, that they should take a look at how that person's using themselves, how they're, you might say, carrying themselves as they go through. But no, they just went, they don't know that that's an issue, and they just go for the cheapest. Now,
Mhm.
nowadays, it's quite different. Nowadays, people go, they want to make sure, they want to check the background, right? Make sure they don't have a serial killer or a child molester, whatever.
Unfortunately,
People are
yes.
very
Yeah.
concerned about stuff like that,
Mhm.
but they still not particularly concerned about the concern that Alexander had.
Yeah.
But all of that's by way of saying that when you're teaching a class, especially younger kids,
Mhm.
you are the center of attention.
Mhm.
And they're observing, and my wife Ann, we were talking about this. She used to teach ESL in high school, and she said anything you do differently, they're gonna immediately spot it.
Mhm.
Oh, you have a different necklace today or whatever. They notice every little thing
Mhm.
about you, but they
Yeah.
also notice a lot kind of unconsciously. I mean,
Mhm.
they're not they don't say, "Oh, look, our teacher's got really good use." No, but there's this teacher, and they're a little bit mimicking her,
Mhm.
a little bit mimicking her.
Oh, for sure.
So you've got that. I guess it's both could be considered a curse or an opportunity, depending on how you want to look at it.
Yes.
But
Yes.
you have that ability to affect
Yeah.
them in ways that they would not consciously be able to say, "Oh,
Mhm.
yeah, being in her class, I felt easier," or something like that.
Yep.
Um, but you can be sure that they're getting a good experience from that.
Right.
And they're in
And
an
that's something.
age, they're in an
Yeah.
age, they're too young to really be interested in doing something like taking Alexander lessons. But at that age, it's way easier for them to make changes. Way
Mhm. They're
easier.
also curious, you know.
Hmm.
If you present it out of curiosity, like, hey, did you notice? Did you
Yeah.
know? This is
Yeah.
so weird, you guys. Did you notice, any anomaly or something weird, like, do you know where the middle, where your head actually meets your spine? Just feel this.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're curious about those things. So
Yeah. Yeah.
to play with it.
Well, those are the kind of things like head-neck relationship, sits bones.
Mm-hmm.
That should be taught in kindergarten. But the problem is, the kindergarten teachers have a lot of other stuff to deal with, and it's not reasonable to say, well, we should train kindergarten kids teachers to do that. When I first met my wife, I said, really, you should be in kindergarten, get the kid. And she said, do you have any idea what teachers are dealing with these days? They got stuff coming at them all the time. Do this, do that. And the last thing a teacher wants to hear is, well, here's another thing you should do while you're
I
teaching.
know. That's
So,
why it's fun. You really use this while you're teaching other things.
exactly.
It
Yeah,
doesn't have to be its own unit.
exactly. And
It's
that's
webbed, it's
that's
webbed
likely
in.
to be the most effective way to
Mhm.
actually bring about some change
Mhm.
in them. So, yeah. Well, maybe we should end this and have one more where we do a little more of that getting chair sitting stand sit to stand to sit, which I don't think we did.
Okay.
And anything else that's come up, and maybe tentatively think, well, this the next lesson might be the last
Our
one.
last one. Okay.
Um, and of course, you can always come back for refresher courses.
Okay.
Do that.
Yeah.
Usually after a few months, something's come up and they don't really quite know what to do, and they really would. Some of them figure it out themselves. Sometimes they think, well, maybe a lesson or two
Yeah.
would be useful.